How's it going, Star Seekers? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Luke, and in today's review we're going to be taking a look at Waifu Discovered 2 Medieval Fantasy, the sequel to last year's Waifu Uncovered, which for some reason has undergone a name change. Now if you've never heard of these titles, they're essentially shoot 'em ups or strip 'em ups as they've been called, where the player has to shoot enemies and gather crystals to strip the clothes from beautiful anime babes. It may sound a little perverted, and it probably is, but if this kind of stuff is your bag, then you've come to the right place for a review. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more Nintendo Switch content, and let's get started. So if you've played the first game and loved its bizarre excuse of a storyline which attempts to justify the requirement to strip anime cuties of their undergarments, then you'll no doubt be overjoyed to hear that the sequel doesn't divert from this original plot. In Waifu Discovered 2 Medieval Fantasy, as you may have already guessed from the title, you have been summoned to a medieval world by this old hag who looks like Yubaba from Spirited Away. The same bunch of evil creatures from the first game have invaded the land and infected the clothes of some of the prettiest girls, absorbing their vital energy, which makes the bodies very old very fast, and by the use of Yubaba's magic, you've been shrunken down to deal with these evil critters and destroy the infected clothing before it's too late. Now as I said, the plot is pretty ludicrous, but it does serve a purpose, and it's actually a better plot than some of the games that I've previously played, so I don't really have any issues with it, but it is just an excuse to strip girls naked, which, to be honest, again I have no qualms with, because let's be honest, sex sells, and there are a lot of games out there which try to use a convoluted plotline to justify their shameless exposure of the female figure, but at least with a development studio called One Hand Free Studios, so you know what you're getting, and if you're watching this review and considering buying the game, then you probably don't have any issues with it either. So much like the storyline, gameplay in this second outing follows suit, and its premise is near identical to the first game. However, there have been some changes which in my opinion improve upon the original formula. It's worth noting that just like the first game, this one can also be played in 2-player mode, but considering its premise, I'm not really sure that you'd actually want to. Now to start with, you once again get to select between 2 different girls or levels, and in the beginner mode you'll continue doing this for 7 levels until you've rescued them all. Each time you select a girl, you get to select a censorship level ranging from a variety of fully censored modes which change the colour of the image and pixelate it, all the way up to fully uncensored mode where the girls bare all. Uncensored mode, which automatically unlocks after you rescue a certain amount of girls, removes censorship from the top half of the girls, but if you're wanting a peek at the downstairs mix-up, then you're gonna have to unlock fully uncensored mode, and I'll reveal the secret code required to do so towards the end of this video. Now the levels themselves see you flying around in your miniature ship and blasting enemies which drop crystals. You then have to collect these crystals to remove the infected pieces of clothing from the girl in the background, and after relieving her of all the infected garments, you'll then face the boss fight to see the level out. While the gameplay itself is relatively simple and doesn't pull any surprises, I personally did still enjoy it, and they've actually stepped up the difficulty a little with this second game, making both the enemies and bosses more challenging, especially in the early game. Now as you play your way through the levels, enemies will randomly drop power-ups which can be collected to improve your ship's stats, and these include things like additional bullets, faster fire rates, and drones which circle around your ship and fire on enemies. But a new addition to Waifu 2 is the inclusion of an in-game shop which can be accessed between levels, and here you're actually able to buy upgrades and ship level ups using the cash you earn from levels. The game has a variety of ships to select from which are unlocked by completing different levels, and each of these have their own strengths and weaknesses and maximum upgrade levels for each of the stats, and they do add a little bit of variety to gameplay. Now when it comes to the enemies and bosses, while there is a decent amount of variety to them, I didn't think that there was as many enemy types as in the first game, though there were still enough to keep things interesting. The number of enemies that you encounter in levels scales as you complete each level, making the game more challenging the further you get into it, but unfortunately the bosses don't really change much, and while they do each have their own attack patterns, the difficulty doesn't seem to increase, and so the final few bosses just end up being a bit of a breeze once you have your fully upgraded ship. Now, aside from beginner mode, you also have arcade mode, which offers a much more challenging gameplay experience with higher numbers of enemies to beat and tougher bosses, and there's also an additional damsel in distress to rescue, but aside from this I couldn't really see a difference between the two modes. The one finger game mode also makes a reappearance, though this can only be played in handheld mode with a touchscreen, and there's also a gallery where you can view each girl in various states of undress, though you do have to unlock each version of them through gameplay. Now overall, while the plot is a little shameless, I actually found gameplay in Waifu Discovered 2 to still be pretty enjoyable. While it's by no means the best shoot 'em up that I've played, it does have a unique premise for its gameplay, which in itself is pretty solid, and it does dare to be different, obviously at the expense of being a little crude. Before we move on to the graphics and audio with this one though, as promised earlier, I'll share with you the secret to getting to see everything, and so to unlock the fully uncensored version of the game, you first need to enter the Konami code at the game's main menu, and then you need to beat the game on arcade mode to unlock the final anime babe, and you should then see the fully uncensored mode unlocked in the censorship options. If it's anything like the first game, you'll have to re-enter the Konami code each time you start the game, but I'm pretty sure that won't be an issue for you. So graphically, Waifu 2 has improved a little upon the first game's visuals, though it has still retained the bright colour palette and cutesy enemies, and I also like the game's boss designs, with my personal favourite being Magic Fingers, a floating head and hands who's not too happy about you interrupting his fingering. The quality and variety of the anime girls has also been improved with more detailed and realistic looking images, and this will no doubt please some people, especially those who thought the first game's anime characters looked a little too cartoonish. On the audio side of things, while the sound effects are pretty standard and there's nothing too special to report here, we do get another happy sounding high tempo soundtrack to blast along to, and this was pretty enjoyable and fit well with the gameplay. So when it comes to the game's performance, for the most part the game holds up well, and though we do see a bit of slowdown when there's an excessive number of enemies and projectiles on the screen, I actually found this pretty beneficial as it helped with avoiding all of the on-screen detritus. Other than this though, I really can't say that I encountered any real issues with the game, aside from the boss scaling which I did find a little inconsistent, and the fact that there's not really that much replayability once you've, shall we say, had your fill of what the game has to offer. All in all though, I thought that Waifu 2 was a decent little shoot 'em up, and when it comes to my own personal rating, I'm going to be giving Waifu Discovered 2 Medieval Fantasy 3 out of 5 stars. If you're a hardcore fan of classic shoot 'em ups, or perhaps a little prude and adverse to a couple of cartoon nips, then this one might not be for you. But if you enjoyed the first game and are open to playing something a little different, or just enjoy a spot of nudity in your games, then Waifu Discovered 2 may just tickle your fancy. And so that just about does it for this review of Waifu Discovered 2 Medieval Fantasy on the Nintendo Switch. Make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts and opinions on the game in the comment section below, and if you enjoy this kind of content and want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.